The most dynamic and future-focused cities on the continent are in North Africa. Find out which ones these are and how cities in sub-Saharan Africa match against them. Hello and welcome to Global Business, live from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. I am Penina Karibe. Lots coming up tonight, including these stories. Curtains are drawn at the Africa CEO Forum in Geneva, Switzerland. And Moroccan companies turn to sub-Saharan African countries for investment opportunities. Cities in North Africa, specifically Cairo, Tunis, Algiers and Casablanca, offer the best opportunities in the continent for investors and people living in them. A new report by multinational professional services network PricewaterhouseCoopers points out economic growth, the state of infrastructure, human talent and how the society operates in the capitals of Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria and Morocco. The cities seem to be reaping from years of investment in infrastructure development, establishing cultural and social traditions and creation of strong legal systems. Johannesburg, South Africa's commercial hub, comes in at 5th position thanks to its infrastructure network and services that was set up quickly for political reasons. Ghana's capital, Accra, has built a reputation for the quality of its telecommunication system, low rate of crime and progress in democracy. Nigeria's commercial center, Lagos, is lauded for its cultural hubs, while Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, is regarded for its financial services. Mariam Bemard sat with Paul Cleal, head of PwC's Africa Business Unit, for some insights into this report. Here are excerpts from that interview.
We're talking about the new report out today, and I'm wondering if you can give me a little bit of an insight into one of the major issues that's affecting most of African economies across the region, which is infrastructure, improving of infrastructure. And the report suggests that cities that make up the bottom of the overall rankings, the so-called gold rush urban centers, why are these commodity-driven cities some of the worst when it comes to infrastructure?
I think the important thing to stress in this survey is it's picking out 20 high-performing cities, interesting cities that are going through a rapid process of development. So I wouldn't take the lower placings to signify that cities are somehow failing. It's just they're not offering up the same level of opportunity that others are. But I think the issue with cities that are based around commodity exploitation and particularly the exporting of materials and commodities is they're very vulnerable to shifts in commodity prices. The extractive nature of them means that a lot of the wealth and the money that's associated with them is leaving the country during the process of exploitation, and that a lot of the infrastructure is built for taking those goods out of the country. They're not for circulating goods and wealth accruing from it within the country itself.
And so therefore perhaps the government hasn't provided enough incentives or spending in that particular area, you would say?
I think that it's a function of the economic activity that drives the particular investment in infrastructure that's going to take that development in a certain structure. I mean, historically, one would have thought that a lot of the routes that were going into Africa, for example, in the early 20th century from the coast in Mombasa into the interior, into Kampala, were largely about moving large numbers of people and goods in, but more importantly, out of the country itself. And that's tended to be the model of development that a lot of African countries experienced during the 20th century.
Mariam Bemard speaking to PwC's Africa Business Unit for some insights into that report. Let's now turn to Geneva, where decision makers from Africa's corporate world were meeting at the Africa CEO Forum to review investment prospects for the coming year and beyond. Optimism was high that a number of countries will register an average 7% growth this year. However, factors such as insecurity and a rise of jihadism in the West and North Africa, as well as fluctuating commodity prices, may slow this growth. Our CCTV's British Marshall joins us now from the Swiss capital, Geneva, with the latest from the annual meet of Africa's bigwigs. Beatrice, it's been 2 days of intense activity there. What were the highlights?
Well, Penina, thank you indeed. The African CEO Forum has come to an end today, and a lot of issues were laid out on the agenda. Today, top of the agenda was the whole question of doing business in Africa. What does it take to do business in Africa? there is a lot of optimism, of course, as you mentioned there, that many African economies will hit the 7% economic growth rate. But of course, at the moment, it is at 5.5%, according to the African Development Bank. But they are talking about the whole question of jihadism, of course, and insecurity and the fluctuating commodity prices, and some of the issues that might hamper that economic growth on the African continent. But generally, of course, Penina, it was very much a private sector initiative, and it was very much looking at how the private sector can accelerate that economic growth for Africa. Well, earlier on, I spoke to the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Donald Kaberuka, and he gives his views on the year ahead for the continent.
And I said to people, no, I think we're still on track because A, the policies are good, contrary to the 1990s and 1980s when the policies were not as effective. But second, you have got fundamental forces at work. Our demography, younger people, urbanized, better educated, and the combination of this plus the uptake of technology has reduced the transaction costs to the extent that any firm in the world looking for growth in the future has nowhere else to look for except for this continent. So you'll have conjectural events now and then in the global economy. But for people like me, you step back, you look at the numbers with a microscope, and you say, except for country X and Y, who might be having some political issues, for the rest of the continent, we are convinced that we're still on the right track.
Right, so let's take you to Somalia now. And hundreds of Mogadishu students, together with the local NGOs and civil societies, took to the streets of Mogadishu to protest their dissatisfaction with oil companies exploring for oil in Somalia. The protesters specifically called for Eni, the Italian multinational oil and gas company, to leave Somalia. These companies are believed to have been undertaking seismic surveys for both onshore and offshore oil exploration. It is believed that Somalia's oil and gas potential remains largely untapped.
You see, today we are protesting foreign companies' activities on our seashores. These natural resources is the future of our country. It will benefit us. We don't want our resources to be illegally depleted. We ask Italy to leave.
We're determined to ensure that this stops. The Italian government cannot remain a friend of Somalia and at the same time steal our resources. We hope they chose friendliness and ensure that Eni leaves. Eni is an oil company and the Italian government has over 30% ownership of the company.
Let's go back now to Beatrice Marshall, who joins us from the Swiss capital, Geneva, with the latest from the annual meet of Africa's bigwigs. Beatrice.
Yes, indeed, Penina. One of the issues that has come out here at the conference, of course, is how easy it is for doing business here on the continent. There were a number of economies, of course, that were seen as the economies to monitor and to watch in the coming year, this 2015. And one of those economies, of course, was Ethiopia. And at the moment, I'm now joined by Mr. Moab Merib. He's the Group Executive Director of Infra Group, an investment firm with interest in financial services, industries, and infrastructure development. Thank you for joining us. Now, Ethiopia is being showcased as one of the economies to watch in 2015 on the African continent. What is it that the country is doing differently?
First of all, thank you for having me on this program. I would attribute the growth and economic stability in Ethiopia into four categories. The first one is the peace and security that we have enjoyed for the last 20 or odd years. The second one is the economic environment, which is very enabling and predictive to doing business in Ethiopia. The third is, an all-inclusive policy-making decisions and mass collaboration of the people of Ethiopia across the sector. And finally, the doing business in Ethiopia is reasonably easier over the years, and people like us who have lived for many years outside the country have seen these opportunities, and we've returned, and that's how I see it.
All right.
And
one of the other issues, of course, that came up at the conference was the whole question of trading within the region, and many felt that at 12% intra-Africa trade was completely or extremely too low. I mean, what is it that the continent is going to try and seek to ensure that that intra-Africa trade situation is raised?
Inter-Africa trade is very important for all Africans in general. I can certainly say from our country's perspective, Ethiopia is trying her level best to integrate the regional economies in terms of infrastructure development, railways from north to south, from Ethiopia to Kenya to South Sudan, and also to Djibouti have been improved. That in infrastructure investments, not only in railways, in roads, and airports, facilities, that will greatly increase the integration of the region. That's how I see it. And there are tariff barriers and integration that needs to be done, and the governments have to do their work in that respect. And a lot of things are happening in that respect of understanding, doing greater business in Africa.
Okay, and most of the people here were showcasing their experiences in terms of the ease of doing business on the continent. And you have an industrial park, one of your major projects. So what's been your experience in doing business in Africa?
In our case, one of the primary drivers of the economic growth, the phenomenal growth in Ethiopia, is the construction sector. The government is investing in a lot of infrastructure projects, from power to roads. So our industrial park is construction material, supplies of the aggregates and whatnot is required for as an input for industrial raw materials. In terms of acquiring land, business license, it's all a one-stop shop that we did. We did our studies, very supportive environment. I'm very positive of the support that I got from our country, and I want many more countries to come to Ethiopia and invest. That's my experience.
That is your experience.
Yes.
Of course, there was a lot of investor appetite here, a lot of investors wondering how they can get to the continent. Though you also represent other investors on the continent and in Ethiopia. What's your experience?
My general experience about Africa in general, speaking about Africa, too little is known about the opportunities in Africa. That's the first thing. Secondly, we need to be more proactive in the sense of presenting our cases and the opportunities that are out there in different parts of Africa. Third, I'm one of those guys that believe that the time is for Africa. This is our time. As a diaspora that has returned home, diaspora can make a lot of difference in the continent economic growth, and we can be the ambassadors to bring in many more investors. So that's my general advice, if you want to say it.
All right, Moab Merit, Group Executive Director of Infra Group. Thank you very much for joining us here in Geneva on Global Business. Well, Penina, there has been a lot of optimism that African economies will remain resilient throughout the coming years. Well, the Africa's CEOs have been talking about not just 2015, but going all the way to the next 5 years. And they're looking at how the private sector can accelerate Africa's economic growth to that 7% that many here are looking forward to achieving over the next few years. Penina?
Thank you, Beatrice, for this interesting insights. Beatrice Marshall live for us in Geneva. Well, let's focus now on the stocks. And Kenya's benchmark NSE 20 share index fell 0.5% to close at 5,313.84 points, driven by profit taking, especially by investors abroad. The index has risen just once in the past 10 sessions as investors started booking gains after it hit a 7-year peak. Coming up, Niger teeters on missing the digital migration deadline, citing financial constraints.
Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast-changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening.
Global Business, weekdays at this time on CCTV Africa.
Sustainable development and a commitment to developing partnerships with Africa. Some of the key phrases already used at the Africa Global Business Forum here in Dubai.
There is a need for a predictable environment in which investors have to put their money.
You're on Global Business. Welcome back. France, Germany and Italy have all agreed to join the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank just a week after Britain joined the financial institution. AIIB, which was only launched last year, is a China-led international development bank that targets investment in Asian infrastructure. Analysts consider the nascent institution as a rival to the Western-dominated World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. The institution had 26 founding member countries early this year, primarily Asia and the Middle East. South Korea and Australia are also considering membership. The 17th of March was the last day to apply for the membership in the bank, according to procedure. Egypt hosted an economic summit last weekend in the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. Yasser Hakim now looks at what the Chinese delegates presented at the meeting.
The economic conference attracted investors from more than 80 countries. China attended with a high-level trade delegation. Bilateral trade has jumped 16% to $10 billion in the last year. Most of it are Chinese exports to Egypt. Investments, however, have not exceeded $1 billion. Negotiations are ongoing for more.
5-hour meeting yesterday with the Chinese delegation. As you know, we've been in contact since, in close contact since the visit of President Sisi to Beijing. Several projects are being discussed and negotiated, mostly in the realm of transportation and of energy.
Talks were fruitful. China signed a $10 billion mega agreement to fund and operate the first high-speed train in Egypt. Another $2 billion deal was signed to establish power generations in addition to an MOU in the oil and gas sector.
In Egypt, there were good conditions for investment. There were plenty of human resources and lower price for the laborers, and this is very good for the company.
The latest economic reforms has attracted interest from the Chinese companies in the economic conference. But that's not all. The Chinese premier will be visiting Egypt in mid-April, and analysts expect more trade and investments for China to pour into Egypt in the near future. Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Sharm el-Sheikh.
Niger is making last-minute preparations for digital switchover ahead of the June 2015 digital broadcasting deadline, but a glut of challenges between government and local broadcasters threaten to delay the process. Financial difficulties faced by broadcasters and the government itself might scuttle the switchover, as Mahia Mutua reports.
Niger, like other African countries, is committed to migrating to digital broadcasting by June 2015. But the entire process is threatened by severe financial challenges.
Almost all the technical scheme job is done, but you are now restricted by lack of finance. The government is about finding ways and means to avail the necessary resources so that we can deploy equipment on the field.
The high cost of the migration has also come under sharp criticism from broadcasters and businesses. It is estimated that the migration will cost the country at least $30 million.
With the financial means in my country, it's not possible to migrate right now. I'm not saying we should not go on with the digital migration, but because we're talking about finances, the $30 million is a bit ambitious, don't you think?
The appointment in June for Niger is hypothetical because for me there's been no upstream work. There's been no work done to really raise enough media players but also raise awareness. I know many countries are late and I will not be surprised if Niger misses because of laxity.
Niger is one of the poorest countries in the world. Its economy is slowly growing with the mining of uranium. Mahia Mutua, CCTV.
Let's look at commodities now. And gold fell to a 4-month low on Tuesday on investor jitters ahead of a Federal Reserve policy meeting that may offer further clues to support expectations of a mid-2015 rise in U.S. interest rates. Coming up, Moroccan companies turn to sub-Saharan African countries for investment opportunities. Welcome back to Global Business. Moroccan businesses are increasingly turning their focus away from Europe and the Middle East and towards Africa. A leading pharmaceutical company has boosted exports to the rest of the continent and plans to open new factories in other African countries. Leslie Mirungu reports.
This is a hub of operations for Pharma 5. It has been in business for 30 years and has become the #1 pharmaceutical manufacturer in Morocco and the leading supplier to the state health authorities. Pharma 5 now has its commercial focus on Africa.
We share a lot in common with our African brothers. We share the culture, we share the same language, and we share a very good political relationship, which permits us, at Pharma 5, being a Moroccan laboratory, to do business in the majority of these countries.
The privately owned firm manufactures more than 350 products, from penicillin to anti-inflammatories. It produces more than 50 million packets and bottles of mostly generic drugs annually and employs around 1,150 employees. The business has grown in line with Morocco's expanding health sector, with more citizens now able to afford better health care.
It's very important for us to be in Africa. It has allowed Pharma 5 to keep up its double-digit growth and to see a really strong evolution of the business in Africa. That has allowed us to maintain our position as the leader on both the national level and the international level.
Morocco is in Africa. It's an African country, of course, but the choice to direct its economy these last years towards the African continent is a strategic choice. Firstly, on the political level, Morocco is somewhat rejected by others in Africa because of the Sahara question, that is the disputed sovereignty of Western Sahara. Of course, Morocco wants to get back into Africa, and as political efforts have not been able to resolve the problem, there is a hope that economic relations can promote a better understanding of the place of Morocco within Africa.
Backed by the political efforts of the state, exports have really taken off in the past 5 years. The company now sells to around 36 countries globally, 28 of which are in Africa.
I will say that Morocco is at a crossroad, and it is this crossroads that although we are not a poor country, we aren't a rich nation and we cannot compete with the massive economies nor the emerging ones. But through being at crossroads, I think we have a role in the triangle, a small hub between Europe, the Arab and Asian world and the continent of Africa.
Entre l'Europe, le monde arabo-asiatique et le continent africain.
Pharma 5 is slowly becoming one of the biggest drug manufacturers in Africa, and it now wants to open factories in Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire. Leslie Mirungu, CCTV.
Pilots from across the globe have gathered in Tunisia to show off their magnificent hot air balloons. For 1 week, the skyline in the southern city of Sousse will be transformed as 18 balloons take to the air for the country's first festival dedicated to hot air balloons. The festival has enticed pilots from Taiwan, Italy, Hungary and Poland. The experts are letting enthusiasts join them for an hour's balloon ride for the price of 200 Tunisian dinars or just around $100 US. The organizers are as enthusiastic as the pilots and hope the festival will become a permanent fixture on the country's tourism scene. The Tunisian Balloons Festival continues until Monday, 23rd of this month.
The main goal is to give a new image of Tunisia, especially regarding security. A totally different image from what we hear about. We are on the ground, the pilots are here, we fly over Sousa, and we can see what's happening. People see us in total security, in calm. The theme of hot air balloons are even linked to the calm in Tunisia. We follow the speed of the wind.
It's the first time in Tunisia, and it has always been a passion for me, so it was really something not to miss, especially with Youssef. We always speak of flying objects, aviation, and things like those, and I want to pass on to him the passion of space and flying.
What I liked is that I always wanted to have my head in the clouds, and today we all had our heads in the clouds, literally and figuratively. It's amazing.
Well, let's look at the currencies now. The Kenyan shilling was steady at near 3-year lows on Tuesday as traders acted carefully on prospects of the central bank pumping in dollars to cut any volatility. The shilling closed at 92.05 to 92.15 against the dollar and changed from Monday's close. The central bank sold an undisclosed amount of dollars on Monday when the shilling touched its lowest level since November 2011. On Global Business tomorrow, we'll look at the increasing role of Abuja, Nigeria, as the place where deals are cut away from its intended purpose as an administrative capital. And as Egypt celebrates deals in billions of dollars after the Sharm el-Sheikh conference, we'll be talking to the man who made it possible and in just 3 months. And that's it on Global Business. Send your feedback to Global Business Africa at cctv.com. Visit us on Facebook. Our page is CCTV Africa. Also stay in touch with us on Twitter using the handle at CCTV News Africa. I am Penina Karibe. Thanks for watching.